4:30 a.m. The alarm clock screamed in the dark, slicing through the silence of Marcus Chen's tiny Queens apartment. For most people, mornings meant another routine. But for Marcus, every day meant something worse. Another 8 hours of invisible labor at New York's busiest airport. Another shift as a ghost in the machine, unseen, unthanked, and utterly replaceable. For 23 years, Marcus carried America's air travel on his back. One heavy suitcase, one overtime shift, one forgotten double of time. But what he didn't know, on this particular morning, was that his life was about to change forever. A discovery hidden deep in the shadows of John F. Kennedy International Airport would push him into the heart of a crime story so unbelievable it reads like fiction. Yet every word is true. Marcus Chen was 42 years old, though the lines on his face made him look a decade older. Years of lifting, bending, and surviving on cheap coffee and overtime had carved exhaustion into his skin. His hands, scarred and calloused, had touched millions of bags, but never anything that truly belonged to him. He lived alone now, in a one-bedroom apartment that swallowed nearly 60% of his income. His marriage was gone, dissolved in lawyers' offices where his ex-wife took half of everything he never really had. Nights were spent microwaving cheap dinners, watching a pawn-shop television, and wondering if this was all life had left to offer. Even his morning shower reminded him of his place in the world. The water ran cold for the first 3 minutes, a small punishment in a building the landlord had long since stopped maintaining. His uniform, faded and thinning at the elbows, hung from the back of his door like a sentence he was forced to serve daily. Employee #47, 291. Baggage handler, level 2, $18.50 an hour. No pension, no future, just routine. When he finally slid behind the wheel of his 15-year-old Honda Civic, the odometer read 247,000 miles. Every squeal and rattle warned him the car didn't have much time left, but like Marcus, it kept going. Past the sleeping suburbs of Queens, past the glowing billboards promising luxury he'd never afford, until the lights of JFK International appeared on the horizon like a city within a city. It was a sprawling empire that generated billions in revenue, but for Marcus and the thousands like him, it offered nothing but tired bones and forgotten paychecks. He drove into the employee lot, surrounded by rusting cars that told the same story. The invisible workforce that kept the airport alive, while remaining completely unseen. Marcus parked his beat-up Honda in Section E7, the same cracked asphalt space he claimed for a decade. The employee lot looked nothing like the polished parking decks reserved for passengers. Here, potholes went unfilled, lampposts flickered out and never got replaced. Nobody cared, because the people who parked here weren't passengers. They were guards, cleaning crews, baggage handlers, thousands of invisible workers who arrived before dawn and left long after dark. Their names unknown to the very travelers who depended on their labor. The walk to the employee entrance carried Marcus past the glowing terminals, where even at this early hour, travelers moved with purpose. Business executives clutching laptops, on their way to meetings in cities Marcus had only seen on the news. Families dragging suitcases, heading off to vacations that cost more than his annual salary. College students returning to schools that charged more in tuition than Marcus made in 3 years. For a brief moment, he stood outside the reinforced glass doors, watching that world pass him by. Then he swiped his badge, passed the biometric scanner, and descended into the other side of the airport, the side most people never saw. The transition was jarring. Upstairs, everything gleamed. Polished marble floors, art installations, and climate control that kept the air perfectly balanced. Down here, where Marcus spent his days, it was all concrete floors, exposed pipes, and fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects. The air tasted stale, recycled endlessly through old circulation systems. This was the circulatory system of JFK International. A maze of corridors, conveyor belts, sorting rooms, and cargo facilities that kept the glossy illusion alive upstairs. Passengers only saw efficiency. But down here, the workers knew the truth. This was an industrial machine. The baggage facility itself was a cathedral of noise and steel. Ceilings stretched so high they vanished into darkness. Conveyor belts snaked in every direction, mechanical rivers carrying thousands of bags an hour to their destinations. The air trembled with overlapping sounds, the grind of motors, the hiss of hydraulics, the sharp beeps of scanners, and the distant thunder of jets taking off above. Workers in blue uniforms moved like clockwork through the chaos, each with their assigned zone, each responsible for their quota. Injuries were so common, they barely registered anymore. Back strains, repetitive stress, bruised knees, everyone carried them, but no one complained. Jobs paying $18 an hour with health coverage didn't come easy. This was Marcus' life. Essential, yet invisible. Without him and his co-workers, the system would collapse. Yet to executives, he was just employee hashtag 47, 291. Another statistic on a spreadsheet. His supervisor, Janet Morrison, didn't even glance up as she handed him his clipboard. Done. Special handling today. At 55, Janet had been in cargo operations longer than most of her employees had been alive. Once, she'd been a handler herself, back when the pay was better and promotions possible. Now she commanded 200 workers across 3 shifts with the efficiency of a military officer. Diplomatic cargo, Flight 447 from Miami. Gate C7, she said flatly, eyes fixed on her computer screen. Straight to federal inspection. No delays. No questions. Chain of custody must be airtight. Marcus took the clipboard, the words barely registering at first. Diplomatic cargo wasn't routine. It was unusual, sensitive, sometimes even dangerous. And in his world, the more unusual the assignment, the bigger the secret behind it. Marcus nodded silently as Janet rattled off the instructions. Get signatures. Follow the chain of custody. No delays, no questions. He'd heard it all before. Special handling jobs came up once, maybe twice a week. Government shipments, secure cargo, the occasional diplomatic pouch. Nothing ever out of the ordinary. He'd done hundreds of them without incident. Classified documents sealed in steel cases. Military electronics wrapped in shockproof foam. Even crates marked with radiation warnings once. Every time, the drill was the same. Move it, log it, don't ask questions. And every time his pay stayed the same. The special handling wing was different from the chaos of the baggage floor. Cleaner, brighter, climate-controlled. Security cameras watched every angle. And Marcus' badge had to clear 3 separate checkpoints before he even touched the cargo. Only the most trustworthy employees got access here. Years of background checks, financial screenings, and spotless work history had marked Marcus as exactly what they wanted: reliable, predictable, invisible. Inside, 6 bags waited on a steel sorting table. Not the cheap roller suitcases he usually saw, but luxury brands he only recognized from glossy magazine ads. Louis Vuitton, Hermes, Bottega Veneta, hand-stitched leather, polished zippers, craftsmanship so far beyond Marcus' pay, great it felt like holding a work of art. Each bore a red diplomatic tag. Federal Courier, inspection exempt. These bags wouldn't see TSA checkpoints. They'd bypass the usual scrutiny and head straight to secure storage. Marcus began his routine, handheld scanner in one hand, moving bag by bag. Each beep updated the system, logging weight ID and routing data with precision that left no room for error. For Marcus, it was muscle memory, until bag number 1. He bent to lift it onto the cart and froze. It was too heavy, far too heavy. After 23 years on the floor, Marcus' hands had become scales more accurate than any machine. He could tell the difference between a bag of clothes and a bag stuffed with books, between a laptop packed properly and one thrown in loose. This one was wrong. A medium suitcase should have been 30, maybe 40 pounds at most. This felt closer to 65, maybe 70. But it wasn't just the weight. It was the density, the balance. Instead of the uneven bulge of travel gear, it felt solid, compact, uniform. Marcus frowned, lifting it again to test himself. No mistake. This was no ordinary shipment. As he shifted the second bag onto the cart, the zipper slipped open just a fraction, just enough for his trained eyes to catch it. And in that tiny gap, his breath caught. Green, stacks of green, not the random bills of a traveler's wallet, but tight bricks of U.S. hundreds. Perfect rows of bundled cash, but tight bricks of U.S. hundreds. Perfect rows of bundled cash, jammed so tightly the leather strained against its seams. Marcus' pulse quickened. His hand lingered on the zipper a second too long before he forced himself to move it to the cart. The scanner beeped, the system logged the bag, and to the cameras above, it was just another piece of diplomatic cargo. But Marcus knew better. This wasn't electronics. This wasn't documents. This was money. More money than he'd ever seen in his life. And the strangest part? Nobody, not even the government, moved cash like this. Certainly not through a commercial airport, in bags marked exempt from inspection. This wasn't official. This was something else. And Marcus, for the first time in his career, felt the sharp edge of temptation cut through the monotony of his invisible life. The room was quiet, too quiet. Just Marcus, the luggage, and the hum of the climate controls. For the first time in years, he noticed something. The cameras weren't pointed at the sorting tables. They watched the doors, the badge readers, the hallways. Not him, not the bags. His pulse quickened. His breathing stayed steady. Training kept his hands calm even as his mind raced. He slid the zipper open just enough to see it again. Not clothes, not books, not electronics. Vacuum-sealed bundles of $100 bills, stacked tight, layer upon layer, filling every inch of the bag. The bills were crisp, new, untouched. Each brick worth thousands. Each suitcase millions. And there were 6 of them. Marcus did the math in his head, numbers flashing faster than he wanted them to. He wasn't looking at thousands, not even hundreds of thousands. This was $4, maybe $5 million in one shipment. And if the pattern held, the regular Tuesday and Friday runs he'd been working for months, the totals were astronomical. Then it hit him like a freight train. These weren't government bags. This wasn't legitimate diplomatic cargo. Those exempt tags he'd scanned dozens of times weren't protecting state secrets. They were protecting cartel cash, drug money, cleaned and moved under the nose of federal security. Disguised as official cargo no one dare question. And Marcus? He'd been their mule all along. Every Tuesday, every Friday, millions sliding through his hands, while he went home to microwave dinners and overdue bills. He'd been invisible gear in a billion-dollar machine, and never even realized it. When he pushed the cart into the federal inspection room, everything suddenly looked different. The white walls, the metal tables, the machines that never beeped. Theater, just theater. 2 men waited as always. Dark suits, conservative ties, lanyards with official badges. The kind of men you never questioned, because they carried themselves like authority. For a year, Marcus hadn't looked twice. Now, he couldn't stop staring. They weren't agents. They were actors, players in the script. Their job wasn't to inspect. It was to not inspect. He watched them nod politely as he unloaded the bags. Just another worker, they barely registered. They didn't touch the scanners, didn't break a seal, didn't so much as unzip a case. Instead, they slid the bags onto another cart, wheeling them toward a service exit. Marcus had walked past that exit 100 times, never wondering why unmarked vans idled there on schedule. He saw it now. The entire operation hidden in plain sight, disguised by the authority of uniforms and the assumption that no one would dare to question federal cargo. For years, Marcus had been the perfect accomplice. Invisible, obedient, unremarkable. But now he saw everything. And that knowledge changed everything. The 2 men in suits signed Marcus' clipboard with mechanical precision. Their signatures authorized nothing less than the next stage of a billion-dollar criminal enterprise. The theater was complete, an illusion of legitimate oversight that cloaked the reality. Millions in cartel cash flowing untouched through America's airports. Walking back to his station, Marcus saw the familiar corridors with new eyes. The fluorescent lit hallways, the endless luggage belts, the constant buzz of travelers. All of it suddenly seemed dangerous, alive with secrets. How many other shipments had he unknowingly passed along? How many workers like him moved fortunes every week without realizing they were props in the largest money laundering scheme in the country? And how had he himself become so invisible that criminals trusted him not to notice? Or worse, not to care. Marcus finished his shift in a fog, going through the motions of loading bags and scanning tags. But his thoughts never left the revelation. He carried it with him like a stone in his chest. This wasn't just about one shipment. This was about a system. By the time he collapsed into his recliner that evening, a beer in one hand and his old laptop balanced on his knees, he was consumed by a single question. What exactly had he stepped into? The answers came fast and terrifying. He learned that airports were prime targets for criminal finance networks, complex regulations, endless cargo, too much movement for anyone to monitor in full. He read about trade-based laundering where dirty money was disguised as legitimate invoices, about bulk cash smuggling hidden in shipping containers, trucks, even diplomatic pouches. And the numbers left him stunned. Conservative estimates suggested that international money laundering networks moved over $2 trillion every year. Trillions, with a significant portion coursing through American airports and banks. The criminal proceeds dwarfed entire national economies. But it wasn't just the scale that chilled him. It was the organization. These weren't crude smugglers with duffel bags and false bottoms. They were multinational syndicates with accountants, lawyers, logistics specialists, people who understood global finance better than most CEOs. They corrupted officials at every level, baggage handlers, customs agents, airline executives, entire systems bent to their will. The more Marcus read, the clearer it became. What he'd stumbled across wasn't a side hustle. It was a bloodstream of organized crime, moving money with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 company. And then came the darker truth. These networks weren't just rich. They were ruthless. Anyone who threatened their flow, informants, competitors, even innocent workers who asked the wrong questions, disappeared. Some were found later. Some were never found at all. Marcus closed his laptop and sat in silence. He wasn't just holding a secret worth millions. He was holding a death sentence, depending on who found out he knew. Marcus knew the risks. He'd read about airport workers who tried to skim from shipments like these. Every one of them ended up dead. Some were found in empty fields, others dumped in rivers. Their corpses meant as warnings. And yet, knowledge is power. Over the next several weeks, Marcus volunteered for more special handling assignments than ever before. Not out of loyalty, out of calculation. He tracked every shipment with the precision of an auditor. Flight numbers, delivery times, which agents showed up, which vans carried the cash into the city. He built spreadsheets late at night, encrypting files and hiding them deep inside his laptop. His analysis was staggering. Shipments arrived like clockwork, Tuesdays and Fridays, usually from Miami, Phoenix, or Los Angeles. Designer luggage, always 8 to 15 bags per drop. Each bag worth millions in crisp vacuum-packed bills. Through surveillance of delivery vans, Marcus traced the cash to warehouses in Queens and Brooklyn. There, the money was counted, sorted, and laundered into shell companies and fake businesses. He wasn't just witnessing crime. He was documenting an economy. What Marcus uncovered was breathtaking in scale. This wasn't smuggling. This was a parallel financial system. Cartel accountants and corrupt executives created shadow banks that moved cash more efficiently than Wall Street. They had entire teams of specialists in currency exchange, finance law, and international banking. They bought judges, bank officers, federal agents. Every piece of the system was compromised. Marcus' numbers were undeniable. Between $3 and $5 million flowed through JFK twice a week. Over $400 million a year. And this was just one airport. The network likely replicated itself across the country, a hidden economy generating trillions. But as Marcus stared at his data, reality came knocking. His paycheck had already been cut by garnished wages, back alimony draining him dry. His daughter called from college, embarrassed to admit she couldn't afford textbooks. His credit cards were maxed, his rent late. His landlord's tone had shifted from friendly reminders to veiled threats. The cruel irony hit him harder every week. He touched millions, more money than most men could dream of, yet he couldn't cover groceries. The men running the operation treated him like a ghost, an invisible cog. Meanwhile, they pocketed profits larger than some countries' GDP, and temptation began to grow. Marcus told himself it wasn't really theft. The families in poison communities. If he skimmed a fraction, who would suffer? The cartels wouldn't miss it. The government didn't even know it existed. He started researching embezzlement cases, fascinated by how ordinary people, bookkeepers, accountants, warehouse managers, rationalized taking what wasn't theirs. Some convinced themselves it was a loan. Others believed they were owed. Marcus' reasoning was simpler. This money doesn't belong to anyone who deserves it. And with every Tuesday and Friday shipment, the thought grew louder. Marcus had crossed a line. What started as curiosity, then morphed into documentation, had now evolved into something far more dangerous. A plan. He justified it the way others before him had. The money was already stolen. Taking it wouldn't create new victims. It would only reroute the profit to destruction. He wasn't a thief. He was leveling the scales. But rationalizations weren't enough. Marcus knew success required precision. He mapped every blind spot in JFK's labyrinth of tunnels. He memorized shift rotations for security guards, janitors, and even maintenance crews. He studied the airport's X-ray equipment, learning exactly what materials would trigger alarms and what would pass unnoticed. He even charted weather patterns. Cloudy afternoons offered a natural cover for exterior surveillance cameras. To Marcus, every detail mattered, because in this world, a mistake wasn't measured in jail time. It was measured in death. His research became an obsession. Nights spent scrolling through case files of criminals who'd vanished without a trace. Stories of forged identities, safe deposit boxes under false names, and offshore accounts shielded by secrecy laws. Marcus opened his own boxes, stocked with cash, false IDs, and burner phones. He set up encrypted files filled with contingency plans for scenarios ranging from random bag checks to armed pursuit. He practiced disappearing, routes from the airport to dead drops, methods of communication that couldn't be traced. The preparations consumed him. His co-workers thought he was chasing overtime for money. 2 months into his surveillance, the perfect opportunity emerged. A Friday afternoon transfer. The shipment, $8 to $10 million in cash. The largest single load Marcus had seen. The timing, during a shift change when security presence was weakest. The conditions, overcast skies predicted by the Weather Service, reducing visibility for rooftop and external cameras. And the agents, complacent, their routines as predictable as clockwork. Marcus spent the final week staging the scene like a conductor preparing an orchestra. Equipment quietly moved into tunnels, tools stashed in forgotten corners. Escape routes double-checked and memorized. This wasn't desperation anymore. This was strategy. And on that Friday, when the bags came off the plane, Marcus wouldn't just be moving luggage. He'd be trying to steal his way out of invisibility. The first bag slid across the scanner with its reassuring density. Marcus had been right. His estimates were precise. Each case felt heavy with the kind of wealth that most men only dreamed about. But today, those dreams had become a decision. He scanned the remaining 9 bags with deliberate calm, his movements indistinguishable from every other day of his career. Except today, every beep of the machine marked a step deeper into betrayal. 12 years of invisible service had led to this. 10 designer cases worth $9.2 million. 10 cases that could either buy his salvation or guarantee his death. At 12:28 p.m., the bags sat waiting for transfer. The shift change loomed just minutes away. Marcus had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head, and yet the reality was sharper, heavier. He wheeled the cart into position, the same cart every worker in the terminal ignored without a glance. Cleaning supplies concealed the equipment he had staged days earlier. To everyone else, it looked like routine maintenance. To Marcus, it was a skeleton key to freedom. The corridor lights flickered once. His doing. Emergency power disabled. The shadows lengthened, swallowing the narrow passage that led toward the employee garage. No cameras, no guards, no questions. Marcus diverted 3 of the 10 cases, his chosen cut, into the maintenance dolly hidden in the storage room. 7 bags continued on their way to federal inspection, undisturbed. 3 cases, roughly $2.7 million. Enough to vanish, enough to save his daughter, enough to make everything different. His pulse thundered in his ears as he slid the dolly into blind corridor, the wheels rattling softly against the concrete. Each turn of the wheel carried the weight of finality. By 12:37 p.m., the cases were secured in his trunk. The parking garage stretched out before him, damp and gray beneath the March rain. Marcus slid behind the wheel of his aging Honda Accord and took one last look at the terminal in his rear-view mirror. He was no longer invisible. He was a thief. As the clock struck 12:45, the shift change began. Security tightened, guards returned, cameras watched. But Marcus was already gone, 3 suitcases heavier, driving toward a future he had planned in shadows. The question wasn't whether he had succeeded. It was how long he could survive. Marcus finished the rest of his shift like it was any other Friday. He hauled luggage, checked paperwork, and kept his pace steady. To anyone watching, he was just another tired airport worker finishing out the week. But in reality, $2.7 million sat hidden in the trunk of his Civic, parked 3 levels down in the employee garage. Each routine task felt surreal, like he was moving through a dream. Every joke from a coworker, every mundane radio call, every idle conversation. It all pressed against a storm raging in his chest. Marcus was both richer than he had ever imagined and living on borrowed time. At 4:15 p.m., as the fake bags moved deeper into the inspection process, Marcus knew the clock had started. The federal agents would deliver the cases. Paperwork would shuffle, and somewhere, hours, maybe days later, the deception would surface. When it did, the operations handlers would know something had gone wrong. And while law enforcement might take weeks to unravel the mystery, the cartel wouldn't. Marcus had calculated again and again. At most, he had 72 hours before suspicion shifted toward the airport. 72 hours to disappear or die. He drove home like it was any other day, his Honda humming to the rain-soaked streets, tarps hiding the fortune in his trunk. Every red light felt like a spotlight. Every passing police cruiser felt like an ambush waiting to happen. But none of them knew. Not yet. Marcus pulled into his driveway, cut the engine, and sat in silence. The cash seemed to hum in the air around him, a physical weight pressing against his chest. He had done it. He had stolen millions from a cartel laundering ring inside one of the most secure places in the country. Now came the hardest part, surviving the consequences. The cartel discovered the deception just 4 hours and 17 minutes after the bags left JFK. Their money laundering system was built to catch betrayal quickly. Weight checks flagged the discrepancy first. X-rays confirmed bundles of newspaper where millions in currency should have been. Chemical analysis of the lead plates revealed an intruder with technical knowledge. This wasn't a sloppy theft. It was a precision strike, executed by someone who understood their operation intimately. Within 6 hours, they had a name: Marcus Reed. On paper, Marcus was perfect. 2 decades of access, a reputation for invisibility, a life strained by debt, divorce, and medical bills. His background told the cartel everything they needed to know. He had motive, knowledge, and the opportunity. Security footage, tediously reviewed frame by frame, revealed subtle behavioral shifts, extended pauses at checkpoints, extra time spent in corridors near the special handling area, patterns invisible in real time, but obvious in hindsight. To the cartel, Marcus wasn't just a suspect. He was guilty. The response was immediate and methodical. Teams were dispatched to JFK, posing as federal investigators, asking questions about security breaches. Surveillance crews set up outside Marcus's apartment, his ex-wife's home, and his daughter's college dorm. Observers blended in with delivery trucks, parked sedans, and maintenance vans. Networks of paid informants and corrupt officials spread across the northeastern U.S., watching transportation hubs, banks, and motels. Any place a desperate man with millions might surface. The cartel had one goal: find Marcus before the federal investigation even began. Marcus had expected a head start. He thought he'd have at least 24 hours before anyone noticed. Instead, his face and vehicle description were circulating through organized crime networks in less than 5. Capture was preferred, but the orders were clear. Dead or alive, Marcus Chin had to be found. These weren't street thugs looking for a quick payday. They were professionals operating with the efficiency of global corporations and the ruthlessness of paramilitary units. And now, all of them were hunting one man. The FBI was drawn in when 3 JFK Airport employees reported death threats. Anonymous callers demanded to know where Marcus was, making it clear that anyone close to him could be next. Special Agent Rebecca Martinez of the Joint Terrorism Task Force took the lead. With 15 years of experience tracking transnational cartels, she immediately recognized the signature tactics. This wasn't just theft. It was a flashpoint in a war spilling across borders. As Martinez's team dug deeper, the case unraveled into something bigger than stolen cash. The fake diplomatic credentials Marcus had used weren't just clever forgeries. They pointed to a long-running security breach, a pipeline that had allowed criminal organizations to launder billions through U.S. airports for years. This wasn't just corruption. It was infrastructure, a parallel system hidden in plain sight. Yet the man who triggered it all seemed to vanish. Weeks passed, then months. Marcus Chin became a ghost story. Some whispered he'd been killed by the same cartel operatives who once trusted him. Others claimed he was living in South America, untouchable in a country without extradition treaties. But the most chilling theory came from those who swore they'd seen him, sitting quietly in diners, walking through bus stations, a man hiding in plain sight, carrying millions in cartel cash, and waiting for the world to forget. By the 4th month of the investigation, Marcus Chun had become one of the most wanted fugitives in America. The FBI task force tracked bank accounts, airports, and even ports along the eastern seaboard. Their big break came from a small surveillance camera in Newark, New Jersey. It caught a man resembling Marcus loading boxes into a rented U-Haul van. Investigators zoomed in on the blurry footage, noting the same walk, the same posture, the same unremarkable presence he'd carried for decades. The van was traced to a storage facility. Inside, agents found tarps, tools, and one duffel bag containing $480,000 in cash. Witnesses reported seeing Marcus drive south on I-95. State troopers set up checkpoints. Airports raised their alerts. For 72 hours, the manhunt dominated national headlines. But then nothing. No more footage. No trace of the Honda Civic. No financial activity. The trail ended as suddenly as it had begun. The cartel, meanwhile, never stopped searching. Rumors spread of men in black SUVs visiting towns up and down the East Coast, asking about Marcus. Some claimed he was captured and killed, his body buried where no one would ever find it. But the FBI never found proof. And without proof, Marcus Chin became something more than a fugitive. He became a story. Today, nearly a decade later, Marcus Chin's fate remains unknown. Did he escape with millions to live under a new name in South America? Did the cartel silence him, making sure no one could ever repeat a betrayal? Or is he still here, walking among us, a middle-aged man hiding in plain sight, invisible, just as he always had been? One thing is certain. The janitor who stole from the cartel exposed a shadow economy running through America's airports and proved that sometimes the most ordinary man can pull off the most extraordinary crime.